I want a cupcake too. Hey, no fair. He got two, Mom. Why does he get more toys? And his Christmas presents cost more than mine. Why does she get a car? I didn't get one when I was 16. Why can't you pay for my school? Kelly's parents are paying for her school. It's so awful. I have to pay for him all the time. Lunches, movies, everything. Babe, you spent more on your toys than I have. I need a purse. Sir, she gets paid more than me, so I'm not being nice to you or her anymore. I'm not speaking to him anymore because he never paid me that money back. After all these years, we've been friends. He did this to me. I'm done. I can't believe I didn't get what was coming to me after Grandma died. I will never forgive or speak to them again. I want my cupcake too. Any of that sound familiar? You know, it does, because it's this cord that kind of runs through all of us. And now, something that you should know about me is that one of my guilty pleasures, besides carrot cake, because you can't get any more guilty than that, it's true, is that I love me some Judge Judy. Now I know, I literally watch it every day. I've got 20 on the DVR at home, and I know it's not like enriching me, you know, like I know it's not filling my soul with eternal goodness, but I love it anyways. I love to watch those fools bicker like nobody's business. So, you know, she took my stereo. Oh, she owed me rent, or oh, we broke up and I want my dog back. You know, I love to watch that stuff. But every once in a while, when you watch, there comes a case that, you know, when you really look beneath the surface, it really starts to tug on your heartstrings a little bit. I mean, on there you find friends of 20 years no longer speaking to each other. You know, you find a mother and a son who are estranged. You find grandchildren and children who haven't seen each other, and siblings torn apart by a probated will. I mean, there's some tough stories on there for sure, but they all have just the one thing in common. They just be fighting about stuff and money. Stuff and money cause all that. You see, when you get down to it, they are just worried about fractions. What is my portion? What fraction of it is mine? And how do I get more of it? Fractions. And it comes from the Latin word to break. And so, you know, how many here have lost someone important in your life over something petty? Maybe it was over something that wasn't petty. Maybe it was over something large of really great value. Maybe it was over some money that was owed, or, you know, sometimes it's a squandered or unshared inheritance. Something you can physically put a dollar value on, or sometimes you say, oh, well, it's priceless. That belonged to so-and-so, or, you know, it's something that you can't buy, but still it's something you can hold in your hands. At the very least, you have people in your life that have been torn apart by fighting over stuff and money. Raise your hand if that's true. You see, it's this focus on fractions that is causing fractured relationships in our life. It's fractions and it's fractures, both from the Latin word to break. Ironically enough, the word fragile also comes from there, to break, reminding us just how fragile our relationships are. Currently, my niece and her mother are viciously fighting with one another over horses and a truck, to the point where they don't speak and all contact is rude, nasty, and hostile. My aunt and mom fought over money for 2 years, to the point where they didn't even see each other, but they just exchanged pages of nasty emails. And she would call and want to read them all to me on the phone. But fracture. You see, it's not only the relationship that breaks, it's us too. It's breaking. I mean, when this happens, you are losing an important person in your life, leaving a fraction of yourself. You know, you become broken, you become unwhole, and, you know, between the hurt and the nasty looks, the worry, the stress, terrible holidays, you lose so much peace and joy that you can't even count. How did we let stuff get in the way? How did we get there? Why do we get so worried about things? I mean, essentially, any way that you break it down, it means more for us. I, me, and my always means less for someone else. And you may say, no, it's not like that. But if you really strip it all away and just look at the numbers, it boils down to you receiving more than you have now. Right or not? That's what fights like that are over. Most of the time, you can't even talk to this person. You can't be around any people that are even fighting about those things because the topic always goes to that. And that's where you end up rehashing the misery. I want my cupcake too. I mean, gosh. Even when you think about those people, your mind automatically goes there to that cupcake. Oh, yeah. I'm giving them cupcakes. It goes to that items of contention. And right now you may be thinking, well, it's not about that anymore. It's just what's right. It's just the principle of it, And here's the thing. All of it may be justified, and you may be right. But either way, you still are losing someone that you love deeply. All over a cupcake? And we say, oh, no, it wasn't a cupcake. It was the whole bakery. It was worth. Still, do we hear ourselves? Do we hear ourselves? What exactly do we consider valuables anyway? Fractions and fractures. My, how they steal the fruits of the Spirit, don't they? Whew, I thought summer was over. Time for rest and relaxation. Time by the pool. Nice and easy days. Time to be carefree and to travel. And it may be. But for us who stay put, this week's gospel spits and sizzles like a backyard grill. Jesus is turning up the heat. In fact, today he screams out, "You fool! You fool!" And that's very strong language, and usually it's only used whenever hope of all reasonable discourse breaks down. But not today. He's throwing it out there. You fool. Now, what could rile him up so much? Let's find out. Here we are in the Gospel of Luke, and Jesus is teaching not only his disciples, but there's a crowd of thousands of people that are there. And so as he's talking, he's talking about like really heavy stuff. He's talking dark and light. He's talking death and sparrows and hair and blasphemy and Pharisees. I mean, big stuff, big moments. Now, as he continues to teach, someone comes up and interrupts all that. He says, "Hey, Jesus, over here." So he stops. He's like, well, think about it. What could be so important for this man? Surely, it must pertain to what Jesus was saying, or maybe it was someone looking to heal a dying loved one again, or it must be life-shattering and soul-saving, right? The man comes up and says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." What? That's not even a question. That's a demand, right? Because in his mind, there is no question about what part of the cupcake that he should be receiving. Now, during this time, an inheritance that would be left would be pieces of land. It would be property. And according to Deuteronomy and Judaic law, the older brother would receive 2/3 of it, and the younger brother would receive 1/3 of it. See, I told you there's fractions in it. Now, we don't know if he was the younger brother. We don't know if he was the older brother. We don't know whether or not the law was followed, whether or not there was any other extenuating circumstances, because there always is. Just ask Judge Judy. There always is. So certainly, Jesus will ask for more information, right? Surely he'll get involved in the cupcake wars, right? Wrong. Jesus says, "Hey, who appointed me the judge and the boss of your land?" Whew. But then he says this to the man, "Friend, you need to watch out. You need to be very, very careful, because there is a lot of greed in this world, and I can see from here that you are teetering on the fence. Your life is not about stuff, and it does not add up to an abundance of possessions. So friend, let me tell you, you need to watch out." Oh, and let me tell you a little story. And I just love, story time with Jesus. Even when they're not warm and fuzzy, because he doesn't just give you the answer. You know what I mean? Like he tells you this parable, which makes you think, which leads you to the answer, so it means more. I always cherish story time with Jesus. So Jesus says, once upon a time there was a very, very rich man, and one year his crops, they grew so big and they yielded a huge harvest. Huge! So much so that he didn't even know what to do with them all. How big would the harvest have to be for a rich man to be excited about it? You see, a harvest like this would be considered an enormous and a generous blessing from God. However, it seemed for this man, instead of finding a blessing, he finds a dilemma. What in the world am I going to do with all this grain? I mean, look at my barn. I mean, it can't even hold that much. What am I going to do? Well, I'll just tear down these measly barns, and I'm going to build some big ones that can hold all my blessings. That way I can kick back and take it easy in the next few seasons. It's important to note that in the Greek and English translations, I, me, and my dominate the narrative. And also, if you notice, nowhere in this passage does it say that the man knelt down. That he said, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for this blessing." This rich man is so self-absorbed that he doesn't take God into account. But God, however, takes him into account. Before he can even knock down a single barn wall, God shouts, "You fool! You fool! You fool! Guess what? Tonight your life ends. It will be demanded of you. So tell me now, just who will get all that stuff in your barns?" I'll give you a hint, it ain't you. Can you imagine the look on the man's face? This man had been bankrupted by his balance sheet, and God said, foreclosure is imminent. You're dead. You're dead. He had made elaborate preparations to guarantee his comfortable future, but he did not prepare for his own impending mortality. What good is it to gain the whole world if you're just going to lose yourself in the process? Death will separate us from our barns. I want you to think about all the energy, and I want you to think about all the time and resources that it would have took for the man to tear down barns and then to rebuild new ones. How else might that energy have been used? What if, whenever the man saw the full fields and he saw all the wondrous grain that he'd been given, what if he got real excited about it and he ran inside to tell his wife and his family, "Hey, guess what? Look at all this. God has been so good to us. Oh, what are we going to do with this grain?" Oh, I know a lot of neighbors who had a really tough winter and a very poor harvest. Why don't we go as a family and knock on their doors and put some food in their barns? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. But before we go, let's say a little prayer together. How might that night have ended differently? What is it that we place value in? Is it money? I mean, is it stuff, cupcakes? What is in your barn? What do you value? What does God value? Is it the same? Should it be? Shouldn't it be? Here's the thing. If you are taking something in this world and placing it in a higher value than the people in your life, or letting it hinder your relationship in any way, then you are taking the ransom that Jesus paid and you are spending it on something else. What good is it to gain the whole world if you're just going to lose yourself and lose a piece of yourself? Which are those people? Told you, the Summer Gospel Grill is sizzling and spitting at us. God has one more thing to say in this passage. He says, if you don't want to end up like this, then you must be rich toward God. Now, if you grew up in the church, most often this is told as a church boosting offering, trying to bump up the end of the year bank balances. For real. But is that what the scripture is intending? Essentially, give it so it can be put in the barn? I think that would be missing the point. I mean, it's more than just about that. We must be rich toward God. And if we are limiting that to money, then most surely we've missed the point. That's what the scripture's about, right? Rich toward God. What does that mean? Rich. Rich. I mean, no. Well, it could be treasure. Could be treasure toward God. I guess like heavenly. I know. Treasures in heaven. Rich toward God. Jesus says in Matthew that we can store up treasures in heaven. But if there's no barns there, well then what does that mean? Well, it must be something that's transcending. Something that is of God. See, treasures in heaven are things that we should value, things that we should want to have because they come from Him, because they bring us closer to Him. They make us better people. They give us not only a happy life here, but they give us a happy eternity there. What are they? They're things that Jesus calls us to do and embody. Forgiveness, kindness, prayer, fellowship with God, love of not only neighbor, but those who we may consider our enemies right now. You see, a teacher never forgets his successful students, and neither does God. So what does this have to do with the person I'm fighting with? Pastor Barbara Taylor once spoke of the happiness she got from buying a new set of cookware. But then she says, when I wake up in the middle of the night unable to sleep because of all the fears and the worries that are taking turns sitting on my chest, it never ever occurs to me to get up and to bring my 13-inch frying pan to bed with me. When you think about the cupcake war in your life and what's truly being fought over, the cupcake isn't ever going to be there for you when you cry. But if the rocky relationship in question was somehow mended, would that person be? And have they been before? We must realize that the thing we stand to gain is nothing compared to who it is that we lose. In this life, you can be rich toward God by spending treasures in heaven right here and now. Do not store them, spend them. The largest being forgiveness, because it's worth the most. Now, I thought a lot about this, and if I was fighting with somebody over something like this, let me tell you what I'd do. After hearing this, if the grill spit all over me, I would go over there and say, hey, here's a check, here's a check, or don't worry about paying me back or whatever. I just don't care about any of that anymore. I don't care about it anymore. And I mean that because I miss you. And you are more important to me than any old cupcake or check could ever be. And I mean this. So together, let's just forget about all that. Forget who's wrong. Forget about who's right. And just focus on us because, that's what I value. I'm willing to do that if you are. Just to let it all go. What do you say? What do you say? Do you hear that? That's the sound of the heavenly cash register dinging up in heaven. Truth be told, it may not work. It may not work. But your very effort will be a treasure in heaven for sure, and you will feel better that you tried. But hey, just imagine if it does. Greed and selfishness are always going to exist, and you can fix yours all you want. But it does not mean that somebody else will. But do not let someone else's stubbornness or greed prohibit you from spending your treasures in heaven. Invest in your future. I'm going to close by telling you a story. Story time with Jonathan. There were two sisters who were very, very close in age who had a seemingly lifelong feud over an heirloom. They were fighting over a ring that belonged to their mother. They argued, they no longer spoke, and they grew old separately. One day, God appears in the living room of one of the sisters, the one without the ring, and He says, sorry to tell you, your sister has died tonight. Do you have a good relationship with her? And no, the sister says. What about that ring? Do you have it now? No, the sister says. Well, how much is it worth? God asks. Invaluable. Invaluable, says the sister. Do you know what the ring's worth in heaven? God asked. She's quiet. $0. Do you know how much your relationship with your sister is worth in heaven? The woman is still quiet. God speaks. To me, it's invaluable. Do you know what's even more valuable than that? God asks. The cost of the ticket to heaven you stand to lose if you don't forgive her. The good news for us today is that our life is not demanded of us yet. It's not. There's still time. We have a choice. We can spend energy and time and misery on bickering and buying, or we can instead be rich toward God and spend His treasures. And rest assured, every treasure you spend, you are guaranteed that one will be multiplied and stored up in heaven's storehouse. Sometimes I like to think that the more treasure that I store there, that the better room I'll get in the mansion when I get there. But hey, who knows?